Hey guys, this is Eric Weingart with Weingart Racing. Today's video is answering questions that you guys have asked in a previous video. In another video I asked if you guys have any questions, put them in the comments, and then in a later video, this one, I will answer those questions. That's what this is. Now, if I sound different, it's because I'm a little under the weather. No, it's not COVID. Here's what I think it is. It's kind of a funny story, so I'll go ahead and share with you before I get to the questions. I can't swim. You might say, how is this possible? I thought your son's a great swimmer. How are you not able to swim? One, I grew up in Enid. There's no lakes around there, so it's not like an opportunity. They do have pools, but we were broke, so my parents could never do it. Hence, never got a chance to learn how to swim. Anyway, I knew it was important for my son to learn how to swim at a young age because this is a true story. One time when I was a school teacher, at the beginning of the year, we always do like little things to get to know a student, and I asked this one kid, I asked all the kids, but do you have any brothers or sisters? And this one child said, I used to have two, now I have one. And so I was like, so I didn't ask because like I knew this was going to get bad, but kids have no problem asking another one. So another kid in the class said, what happened to the other one? And this is the story. And by the way, this is true. They said they were out in the lake and one of her cousins jumped in the water and couldn't swim. And her brother jumped in the water to try saving the cousin. They both ended up passing away. So Bishop at this time was like 3, and I was like, I'm not gonna let him turn into me. So we put him in a Miller Swim School here in Tulsa, and he was in that all the way from 3 until 13, so 10 years, and he graduated out. He does swim classes since then. Me, on the other hand, I never learned to swim, and I took some of the classes like years ago. I never got really good at it. And trust me, this will all play in a point in a minute. Anyway, it's not like riding a bike, at least not for me, because I get in the pool and I couldn't swim very well at all again. So I decided I'm going to take some more swim classes and, you know, get where I can swim, like hopefully decent with my son. Because the other thing is I'm trying to give him pointers on the pool and he doesn't trust me because I can't swim. So anyway, I'm taking classes at Miller Swim School, and where they have us, the pool's big, but they've got 2 sections of the pool. One's this little small area, and that just happens to be where they put us in. Well, as I'm sitting down there getting ready to get in the pool, we're the last session. Well, here's what's in that pool. You got a bunch of, it's their mommy and baby part. So you got kids with diapers just up and down in this pool. And you look at the rest of the pool water, and it's blue, and then you look at that water, and it's like cloudy. And you want to guess where we're swimming in that. This is for the people that, I mean, there's other sections of the pool for different people, but that's where I went. Anyway, point being is, I think that whatever was in that water got up into my nose and caused an infection. It's not COVID. It's kid pool water. Anyway. All right, so let's get to the questions. To make this easier, what I'm going to do is each time I have a new question, I'm going to hold up this card. So if you're one of those people that like to fast forward through it, which I totally understand, when you see the card come up, it means I'm going on to a different question. Now, before I begin with the questions too, I do want to say these are my opinions. You're welcome to your own. Listen to everybody and decide what you think works for your best for yourself. Some of the questions could be longer and some will be shorter because these are what they ask. So the questions could be long, could be short. Let's get started with the first one. So I'm holding up the card. There's your first question. The first question came, is there any simple mods to modify the AFR 220? The answer is no. There are no simple mods to modify the small block Chevy. This is the 227 AFR 220s. Chances are very likely, if you don't know what you're doing, you're really likely to mess up an AFR CNC ported head. I'm just being honest with you. You'll either, one, make it flow worse or make it flow better at an area that you'll never see and worse at an area where you will see. So, for instance, this is a 227 competition one, and this is the AFR 220 race port. They're different, and if you were to do something with either one of them, like I do a valve job, if you just did this valve job, you lost flow. So you have to do other stuff with it. In other words, the point I'm trying to say is there's nothing an average guy can do that would make an AFR 220 better unless you had a pretty extensive knowledge of porting. If you try, you are going to make them worse. And yes, I have seen that. Next question. Okay, the next question is, how can you improve the exhaust port on a Vortex small block Chevy head? Well, you can cut it out to a larger valve, and you could hear a whole bunch of people on the internet say that's a wrong thing to do. And they're right and they're wrong. Here's what I mean. When you go from a 150 diameter, which is stock, and you cut it out to a 1.6, It's not so much about the making it the bigger valve. It's that I get the better valve job in so I can get more of the angle in on the valve. So what I mean by that is you've got your seat, and then the rest of the actual valve job itself comes in when you cut them out to larger. However, if you just put the valve job in and did nothing else, it's probably going to make it worse. So to improve it, I'll put the valve job in, and then I'll start making the throat, and I'll make it larger like it should be, but I also shape it. So it's not concentric, I'm probably saying that word wrong. It's definitely tilted in one way more than the other to help it flow. That helps out quite a bit. So I'd say valve job, go into the bowl, definitely get rid of that ridge, especially around the short side. When you've done that, the flow will come up, and that will improve it. You can also open up the exit, not making it gigantic, but you can make it definitely bigger, and that'll help too. There's some math with that and different things, but whatever you do, don't make the exit just like blown out big. That's kind of ridiculous. So there's that. Next question. Someone asked, when you were at Pushrod, did anybody talk about chamber softening, how it helped? Does it help on NA? Well, the way chamber softening is, I don't have them on these. This is a normal head, but a chamber softening would have like cuts here, and it makes like a dish almost in the head itself. On an NA deal, we really run the quench kind of tight, and what that is the distance between the head and the piston itself. The idea is that we're trying to squeeze as many of these gases into the chamber as possible. So on an NA deal, we usually run them pretty tight. Because you're squeezing them that tight, it makes the burn faster. On a power adder deal, you really don't want to do that, because as the explosion happens, it'll actually ignite the end gases, which are the ones that sit in this area that's out there by the quench, and that's not a good thing. It can cause detonation. So when they do the softening, it makes more of a dish, and the flame's more likely to reach into that area. Anyway, it slows things down, I guess, the best way I could say it. On an NA deal, I don't think, someone asked Darren of this, so when he had this deal, he said there's really no change. And it's because it helps the flame get there, but you also lost some of the, your quench. So it's not pushing the gases in that way, but the flames are getting there. So it's 1/2 of one and a dozen of the other, whatever that phrase is. Point being is, I don't know that it hurts, but I don't know that it helps. On a power adder deal, of course it does, because you want to make the burn slow down to not cause detonation. If you can reduce detonation, you can make more power. NA, we're left with whatever we have, so it's a different story, but I don't think it hurts. So you could do it, and I don't think I don't think it helps, and I don't think it hurts. On a power adder deal, it's way better to have chamber softening. The other biggest advantage is it gives you a bigger tuning window, especially on nitrous, because anybody that's done a lot of nitrous stuff, it doesn't take much to mess things up. You can have one person screw something up, and it really will mess things up. So having the chamber softened like that, it gives you a better opportunity of mistakes, or tuning window, I guess you could say, before things go bad. All right. The next one is, do I work on Pontiac heads? I worked on exactly 2. I don't have the flow plate to flow a Pontiac head, for one. The only heads I've done was a Pontiac 6X, which is a cast iron head, which I'll get the cast iron heads in a minute, because someone asked. They did okay. Excuse me. I didn't flow them, of course. Well, I did. I tried mocking something up, if I remember right, on this to make it work. The other one was a set of Kaufman aluminum ones. Those did pretty good after work. They look nice, but when I talk about Mopar people coming in, there's even less Pontiac people. So that's like a really, 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 really small people that are involved in that. Next question. This one I probably will test and do on a different video at some point. And the question is this: have you ever experimented with changing the guide size to make it where you can run a smaller valve? And let me try to explain. So this is the guide. And on our average small block head, forward, most heads, they're 11/32 stem diameter. Big blocks the same way. Except for the stock ones are 3/8. The question is, if I make a smaller diameter stem, have I ever seen how much flow has been gained? The answer to that is, I haven't done an A/B test to see. I've done it for some stuff because a long time ago, in the sprint car world, ACS, whatever, they didn't have the rule where you couldn't change the stem. So what would happen is we went from 11/32 that was stock and went all the way down to 7mm. These AFRs are 8mm, so even smaller than that. It's really a thin stem. Did it have any issues with it tearing up or anything because the stem was so small? No, but it did give more area. They've since changed that and won't allow you to do that. At least in some sanctions still can, some can't. So the question is, have you seen any flow with that? I haven't done any back-to-back testing to see on that. There is some definitely advantages for it. One, you got more area when you do a smaller stem. Two, the valve weighs less, so there's less problems with valve train control. But here's something to remember, don't do it on the exhaust. The exhaust is open under pressure, so you kind of need a thicker stem. It's fine. On the intake, you get away with it. The other disadvantage is you're probably gonna have to have a custom valve, and that adds up. So a custom steel valve is about $500-600. That's custom length, hard tip, and different back cuts. You can see how it kind of adds up. Compared to a regular one, like an off-the-shelf one runs about $260. So it's more than double. But I'll do some testing on that eventually. The other thing to remember is if you have the guide sticking way into the bowl, if you just make the stem smaller, well, the guide's still just as thick. So you have to taper that guide in some way to get some of that material out so it's not hogging that area. Next one. The question is, do I use a Pitot tube to measure velocities? And the answer is yes, but rarely. In case you're wondering, I've got a Pitot tube. It's actually over there on the Sanyez bench. What it does is you stick it in the port and you can use it to measure velocities throughout the port. I used to use it a lot when I first got started. I use it less and less now. And the reason for it is, as you do more heads, you already kind of know what it's going to do. I mean, if you're just starting out, or it's a brand new head, or maybe some R&D stuff, you'll probably use it quite a bit. But as time progresses, you really use it less and less. The biggest reason is, I know exactly if I make a certain area, like a certain part of the port, a certain size, I know what the velocity is going to be within a few, like 10 feet per second. I've got a pretty good idea. Same with the Pushrod Pinch itself. I know what it's going to be. So using the Pitot tube on every head is almost pointless because this area on all the heads I've tested usually gives that. So do I use it? Yes. I do still use it whenever, like, say for instance on the Cadillac big block head or whatever. That one, because it was kind of tricky and I couldn't figure out what was going on. So that's when you'll use it. So it's like something stumping you, you use the Pitot tube to figure out what's happening with the velocities. You just kind of, remember, it only is giving you data. It's not telling you what you need to do. You got to be careful of that. That can get you into trouble. Some people will chase a Pitot tube number and end up with a port that's really oversized or undersized and just not right. So typically what I'll do is I'll use math. So there's formulas to figure out how much area you need, and I'll use that. And plus I also have so much data now from different heads that I know what this area I want it to be at in different parts of the port, and that's what I'll target. So hopefully that kind of answers that one. This one asks, what material do I use to make a port mold after I'm done? You might find this shocking. I've never actually made a port mold. A couple of my customers have showed the material that they use, but I've never done it. Part of the biggest reason is time. I would like to have a port mold actually of this one and my Dragon Slayer to compare them physically. It'd be kind of neat, but I just haven't. So I don't have an answer for that. I should. I really should. I should have a collection of them right now, because besides the data that I keep for the actual areas inside the port, I also write down or draw a picture of what the shape of that port would look like where I have them, especially over the short side. I'll draw those on my little data stuff, which I haven't shared with you and won't, but that's what I use. But having that mold would probably be a better idea. I just haven't. It's really hard to, there's a lot of stuff you want to do, but as a one-man shop, you realize time is definitely not on your side. So I don't have an answer for that one. This one probably gets asked the most. Do I port heads differently for a power adder deal like Turbocharger or Nitrous versus NA? The answer is yes, slightly. Now this is my opinion. I know a lot of people do not agree with this, by the way. If it's a turbo deal, I will actually still oversize the port just a little. I'm not talking like going gigantic. I might make it a few percent bigger than what it was in A. And you might say, why? To me, and this is the way I view it on this, by the way, the intake port. The way I view it is more like a air compressor with your air tank. The larger the air tank, the more it can supply the air before it's exhausted. So having the port slightly larger and you've got all that boost behind it, by the time the valve opens, it's able to get more of the air in before it loses whatever boost it has. That's me. A lot of people don't believe that. They just, whatever the NA wanted, that's what you do. And this is from different people that have run it, the little bit larger, and I'm not talking going to extreme, because then it takes them too much power to build boost, like they can't get up on it, and then it's a dog. So there's a fine balance. So yes, I have them oversized on the intake ports, but not to a ridiculous extreme. On nitrous though, that one's a little weird, because again, this is me, and others might not feel this way, and I totally understand it. A lot of people, again, will do whatever you do in A, you'll do on nitrous as far as the intake port. I'll get to exhaust ports in a minute. To me, I actually make them bigger than I even do for turbo, and the reason for this is because nitrous, it's more about getting the car down the track, so you can forget the power stuff part of it. I mean, kinda. What I mean by that is nitrous hits, so it's getting it to hook up to go. So for me, what I've been doing is on several of them, I'm making the port larger than even the turbo deal by even a few more percent. And the reason for it is it's going to kill some of that torque, so it allows it to hook up, and then we'll have enough power at the upper end to keep going. A lot of people don't do that, and it's fine. This is just a me thing, like I said. To me, I'll kill some of the torque because they can get it to hook up. So in other words, if you make the port smaller, or even, let's go the reverse way, let's make the port smaller. When it hits, it's going to have so much torque that it can't hook up. So the car itself, even though it might actually have made more power, it can't hook it up. So you end up spinning your tire. People want to win a race. They're not trying to win a dyno competition. I mean, sometimes. So to me, I make the port larger to kill some of the torque, and then it will actually have more power on the upper end. Again, that's my opinion. Now, how much bigger? Not that much. So you're not going to go, say, you're not going to go from a, I'm just generic. You're not going to go from 195 cc head, let's say I required that. I'm just using examples, up to 245 cc's. You're not going to do that. You might go like 210. And I'm using cc's just because that's better, but I'm talking really what I do is more of the cross-sectional areas, but just make it easier for you guys. Now, let's get to the exhaust part of it though. On the exhaust for nitrous, I'll make them big. The reason why is it needs to get out. You need to get the heat out. It wants to leave fast. So the throats will be extremely large. I will actually sometimes, I won't go as big on the intake valve size because I need a bigger exhaust valve size to get the heat out. So that's one of the bigger things. So sometimes I'll sacrifice some intake valve size to make up for the exhaust valve size, bigger exhaust opening. I will not do that for turbo. Turbo, I still need a decent sized valve, but you got to remember the exhaust coming out has to spin the turbo. So if you make it huge like you would for nitrous, there's not a lot of, I mean, there's still velocity, quite a bit of it, but you want a little bit more velocity exiting because it's got to spin the turbo, so it doesn't have as much turbo lag, so there's a lot more to it. So for me, I'll make the exhaust ports bigger for nitrous, a little bit smaller for the turbo deal, and they're still a little bit larger than they are for NA. And that's me. So there's a lot of views on that, and you're welcome to your own. I'm just telling you what I do. So going on. This one's an easy one. This question was, what epoxy do I use for exhaust ports? Simple, none. There's none that's gonna take that heat. You're wasting your time. If you went through and you blew through on a cast iron head and you're trying to fill it with an epoxy, you throw the head away. So there's that question. This one was, how fast, this question came is, how fast a velocity is too fast for like over the short side and over the pushrod pinch? Well, that's back to the Pitot tube. The thing is, there's not a guaranteed answer. I'll tell you what I target, and then you can go with whatever you want. Usually over the short side, I don't want to see a speed faster than 395, but I'll get to more of that in a minute. And then over the Pushrod Pinch, I don't even care. And then you're like, what? You get an area from the math, and that's what it is. If it ends up 310, 320, usually if you do the math right and you follow the formula, you're going to be around 310 to 320 anyway. So that's what you get. So on the Pushrod Pinch side, use a formula, and there's one I could show you, but since I'm filming on the phone, I can't show you, but there's one that I use, and that one gives me the area that I need my Pushrod Pinch. And usually when you target that and you get that, you'll have between 310 and 320. There's short side, usually 395. Now here's the catch. The short side Pitot to velocity really does vary by the actual shape and the design of the head. Some heads can get away with a much, much faster speed over the short side, and they'll never back up on flow because the design of the head, whether it be the short side radius is larger or there's more area at the bowl, less valve angle, whatever else, and I'm just going on through a bunch of them, that design can support a faster speed over the short side. Does it mean you have to have that? No. It just means there's not, like I said, 395, but really that's not a set in stone thing you should follow because it really is head dependent. For instance, if you look at an LS head, LS3 for instance, none of the ones on the internet ports head ever went 395 over the short side. They're already too big there and it never got there. So you might say, well, why don't you fill it? I take that back, that short port did. When I filled all that way that one in, that one actually got to 395. However, would you really want to run that one as your race deal? No, you'd have the lower speeds. So there's that. Each design is different. You really shouldn't, if you end up trying to target a specific speed, you're kind of missing the mark. Really, you're targeting the area and then trying to design a shape that supports that. So area, then figuring out a shape that will work with it. So, and that shape itself can also induce swirl, or it can do a bunch of other stuff too. So it's not, don't take that 395 and set in stone. That's what I found that works for me. Usually if it's faster, it will back up on flow. But then again, it's general. Because for instance, there was a small block Ford head, and it was 435 over the short side, which was really fast. However, it supported it. The Pushrod Pinch, by the way, was like in the 340s. It was fast. The whole port was fast. The size-wise, though, when you look at it, it would, I'm looking at it this way, when it would come in, it was small, but it would flare out so much, and then it still had speed over the short side, so it lost a lot of the velocity from the pinch and had just enough to cross over. Well, whatever that was, it was able to maintain it and never backed up on flow, and even on the dyno, it kept climbing RPM. Point being is, it's not, if you chase that, most heads will follow those rules, but not all, so you got to be aware of that. Target areas, and usually velocity will follow because they go together. So I don't know if that makes any sense. Again, these are my opinions. I'm sure about to get slammed. This is probably the second most asked question is, can you tell me what you could do for 4-valve stuff? I can't, and the reason why I can't is because I have never ported a 4-valve head. So for me to give you any information on that would be disingenuous. And I might lose subscribers for that. I'm sorry you do. This stuff probably will help you though. What I mean by that is, if you look at, when I talk about throat diameters, say for this stuff, let's say you did 90%. Well, this is a 2-valve head. So all my areas from here, when a 4-valve head, you've got twice the area anyway. If you made those 90%, you're so much larger in area than this was at 90%. That's the reason why the throat stuff really can't apply to 4-valve stuff, because you're more area than the 2-valve guys. Beyond that, I really can't give any information because I don't have any. You might say, why don't you port 4-valve stuff? I am so busy with this, I can't do that. Plus, that's more plates. Like each one, like I said, it's 420 and then the different bore. And don't take this the wrong way, 4-valve guys, but they won't pay. Back when I first started, I think back then I was porting heads for like 700 bucks. Anyway, this 4-valve guy kept bugging me, and I told him, fine, I'll do it, $1,400, which is double what I charged for the other ones. He's like, why is it so much? I said, well, simple. I'm gonna have to buy all the flow plates and everything else that goes with it. And he goes, well, it's only one head. Yeah, but you have just as many valves as a, a V8. So, but anyway, I don't know. I understand it. They're just not, I'm not their guy. So I'm not your guy. And I'm not trying to rip off any 4-cylinder guys. You guys do whatever you do. And there's a lot of good 4-cylinder head porters that are out there, even the V6 guys or whatever. I'm just not that guy. So I don't want to lead you wrong. This one was, can you modify that 440 chamber to make it do any better? The answer is the only way you can make that 440 chamber any better is to weld it up and then redo it. And that's highly uneconomical to do. There's no port work you could do to that chamber to make it better. It's already got too much stuff removed and not in the right spaces to do it. It needs to have a chamber like that, because this is what's weird about 440. Essentially, it's a small block Chevy head that's a big block. You got your 2 intake ports together and you got this. The chamber should look something like that. It shouldn't look like a big old flat dish. This is in the 60s. So the only way you could do it is take all, you pay, you'd have to pop out the seats, weld the whole thing up, cut new seat registers, put new seats in, and then grind the shape of the chamber you want. And if you have a dome, you better find someone to can laser scan your piston or cylinder head to make the piston fit. Someone had said when I had the video about, which I think is on this video, is our last video, why don't you use a sonic tester to test where the water is on these ports? I could, unless there's a better sonic tester that I'm not aware of, they don't work well. What I mean by that is I have one. They've got a disc that's like maybe this big. And if you were to put it on this flat surface like this deck, oh, it'll absolutely tell you how thick it is. Try putting it on a curved surface. It won't read. It has to be totally sealed within it, and otherwise it won't work. Unless there's someone with a really, really small head that I'm not aware of. So if I put the sonic tester anywhere in the ports, 9 times out of 10 it will say not getting a reading. And I can put Vaseline all around it and I know it's going to read wrong. The other thing with the sonic tester, which sounds great, is it will not predict when there's porosity. So you could think of like a bunch of little holes in it, and once you ground through, it's just enough where it makes just a little bit of hole and you've got it. So it'll say it's thick there, it won't say how dense that material is. That's what I mean by how porous it is. So unless you guys have some grand idea on a sonic tester that's got, it would have to be, it almost have to be as thick around as this rod here for my pointer. Unless it can be that thick, it's sticking anywhere and take a measurement that way, it won't work. Because mine literally is the size of a dime, which is pretty small even then. It won't read inside of a port besides maybe here on these parts, but down where I would have the hole, it won't read it. This question I've been waiting on. Why don't you port cast iron heads? Why do they still make cast iron heads? Here's the biggest reason I don't port cast iron heads. On average, on a good set of heads, if I work hard, I can finish them in about 40 hours on a set of aluminum heads. The cast iron heads will take about 80 to 90 hours for one set. And in that time, those burrs that I use to grind all that stuff out, I can't use them again. You can really it takes 2 sets if you want to get quick. If you want to do the heads fast, you'll do 1 set of burrs for one head, grab a brand new one for the second set, or second head. And the reason why is because they'll get dull, they won't cut as well, you'll take longer to do the head. So that means a double investment in burrs. And just to give you an idea, it's not like an iron, like whenever I'm porting these aluminum heads, those burrs I could usually go through about 7 sets of heads, and then I'm gonna change them because they're cutting too slow. On a cast iron, really it's 1 head. Now, if I took about the burrs that I use to port the heads, it's about $150. So you're at $300 right there in burrs to cut the heads. That's one. So we've done, it takes twice as long, uses my burrs, and here's the bad part. On an aluminum head, let's say I poked a hole through, because it does happen. 9 times out of the 10, it's easily weldable and fixable. On a cast iron head, I don't care what people say, they're not repairable. There's so many people who have tried repairing aluminum heads, cast iron heads and welding them. All it does is crack and just leads to one thing after another. And this has happened to me before when I ported cast iron. get onto the last port in the dividing line where the cope and drag came together when they made the mold for the head. Pinhole, and you've got a leak. Sucks because you got to start all over again. This is 2022. People complain about there being, why are you guys still using carburetors instead of fuel injection? That's a newfangled thing. Why are we still using cast iron heads? That's what I want to know. They're also heavy. And there's all these old timers will say, cast iron heads make more power. They might put more heat into the chamber, but I promise whatever power they might have gained from that have lost by the weight that they are. So, all the circle track classes that require cast iron heads, astonishing me. I think the only thing that's keeping them going is EQ and, well, Dart, but I don't think they even produce enough now. I don't know why we still have cast iron heads in any competitive race class. I understood back then, I really did, back in the day, because cast iron heads were cheaper to produce than aluminum ones, and that made sense. Now there are many aluminum heads that are far cheaper than cast iron heads. Also, the shipping's cheaper too. Someone said, have you considered a PTS bench? That's a homemade bench. I had my own homemade bench. It worked fine. I don't need another one of those homemade benches because people don't believe them. I've got two. This next question is, have you ever tested the gasket match to see how much more power it made? I haven't, but Engine Masters, the actual show, did, about 10 horsepower. The next question was, can you do a discussion about the back cuts on valves? Have you ever tested different ones? So here we have our regular AFR valve. I have experimented with several different back cuts as far as angles go. The trick is, it's not just the angle, it's how wide it is. And a lot of valves you just can't do what you want to do. For instance, my most favorite one, and you don't have to do this, you may not find it beneficial for you, my favorite back cut's 33 degrees. But typically I'm doing a 50-degree valve job, so the 33 really works well. However, what makes it better is the width. If you can have it wider, it's great. The catch is, a lot of valves you can't, there's no material. So if you try grinding say a 33 in it, you're not gonna have very thick one. And honestly, a good rule of thumb, and this is general, you want your back cut to be twice whatever that seat is on here. So let's say the seat was 50, you'd have your back cut at 100. It can't happen 99% of the time. How you get more of a back cut is what you do is you'll grind more of the seat angle away. It reduces the margin, but it gives you more material to put the back cut. The disadvantage, obviously, is there's not a lot of margin left. And on some valves, there's none anyway. Some valves have such a flat face coming off this way, you can't get a nice, excuse me, you can't get a nice back cut on it. Nature of the beast. On a Hemi, because that was the one that was asked, I haven't played with them, getting ready to, but from what I understand, they like a tulip. So when he had said the carbon built up there and it flowed more, and then when he removed it, it flowed less. That's because the Hemi's coming this way. If you look at this, we're splashing out when it comes. So here's the valve, all the air splashing against it, and it pushes out this way. The Hemi's actually going down, so if it comes out and around, it makes better sense, I hope. That's typically why. However, someone's gonna say, why don't you put a tulip valve on these? One, it's heavy, and two, these type valves flow better than a tulip valve on the intake on most wedge heads. The next question was, what's the best cast iron head for a small block Chevy? The best cast iron head for a small block Chevy is not getting a cast iron head for a small block Chevy. You would get one of the variety of aluminum ones. But I'm gonna pretend you can't find one. The best one you could get for, I think it did the same, street small block Chevy. Probably the best one you could get, if you could find it, would be an RHS 180 or an EQ 180 if you could find them, because both have been out of production for quite some time. If you say Vortex heads were good, the aftermarket is better. And a lot of people don't believe that, but it's the truth. Vortex heads are decent. They were good for a stock head. Most aftermarket, like 99% of aftermarket heads are better. Oh. What head would I recommend? This is the last question. What head would I recommend for a street small block Chevy? Well, if you got bucks, I'd say you need to do an AFR 195. It's pretty good. And a small block Chevy like 350. No one ever complains. If you want to save some money, you can do a Profiler 195. If you want something that's, you can't afford the AFR, but you want something with a little bit better quality for fit and finish, the Vortex IK heads. And I know I'm going to catch some flack on this. What I mean with this is the biggest complaint I have from Profiler 195s from customers is the rockers don't line up well with the valves. And I've had little things too that are just weird. Their fit and finish isn't as quite as well on the Profiler heads, but the biggest thing is the rocker arms. You'll have to get adjustable guide plates really if you want them right. It's an extra charge whenever I sell them, because some people, I'd say it's 60-40. 60% of the people don't have to even work fine. The other 40% really needed adjustable guide plates. But if you wanted to avoid all that, the Vortex IK 200 heads, it'd be great for a street deal. That stuff all works and everything, but there'll be down power between the Profiler and the AFR. So those are great heads. They're more of a street friendly head. You're not gonna set the world on fire. Profilers will make more horsepower for sure. AFR will make even more power, but they'll cost more. So there's all the questions. Now what you see here is for the filming for the next video that I'm getting ready to do anyway, but I'm just gonna give you a little preview. AFR 227s, that's what every one of these are. This is the competition AFR 227. That's the race port AFR 227. And this one I just finished porting that one. You get to see all that information. I'm getting ready to flow a bunch of dual planes on this. You get to see that in a later video. If you're lucky tomorrow, if not, I don't know when. So you guys take care.